I believe that we will one day move to the right or to the extreme left. But it will not be the kind of environment of a very high level of freedom. That is gone. And inflation is a tax on the middle class.
Hi, everyone. This is Sean Ring, the editor of The Rude Awakening. Welcome back to Paradigm Press's YouTube channel. Today, I have a very special guest, someone I've wanted to meet for 20 years now. It is Marc Faber, the editor and publisher of the Gloom, Boom, and Doom Report, to which I subscribe, and I highly recommend that you do so as well. He's also the author of Tomorrow's Gold, which is a fabulous book that's still stuck in the Philippines. It's not here with me now, but if you want to go on Amazon, there's a used copy on there going for about $300. Marc, welcome to the Paradigm YouTube channel.
Well, thank you very much for having me on your program, and good day to all the viewers.
Indeed. I wanted to kick off, and I asked this of all my fellow travelers because I've been out of my country of birth now for 24 years. But you, for people who are unfamiliar with you, and I'm sure there are not too many who are unfamiliar with you, you were born in God's own country of Switzerland. And in 1973, after a move, I guess, to New York first, and then you worked at the Zurich office for White & Weld, you decided to go to Asia. This is your 50th year in Asia, if I'm doing my math correctly. Yeah. What made you do that? I've absolutely been wanting to ask you that for so long.
Well, I mean, I was born into relative fortunate circumstances in Switzerland, and because of my studies, and mainly because of my ski racing days. I was in the Swiss team. I knew a lot of people, and life was relatively comfortable and easy. And my dream had always been to go somewhere in the world where you wouldn't know anyone at all, and then establish the contacts you wanted to, and not the contacts your family had, and so forth and so on. So the company I worked for at the time, they said, yes, we'd like to send you to Asia, to Hong Kong, but we want you to stay there for a while. And so we give you the opportunity to go for 2 weeks to Asia, and then you tell us whether you like it or not. So I went for a day to Tokyo, and for a day to Hong Kong, and for 2 weeks to Pattaya. And then I said, yes, I like Asia.
Oh, that's absolutely brilliant. Fantastic. I'll let the viewers look up what Pattaya is if they don't know. Fantastic. And that's amazing. It took me only 2 weeks as well to get my first transfer over to London. That's fantastic. And I know you still kind of, you still surely follow things going on in Switzerland, and I've been reading your report for ages. But it's really interesting that, the Swiss, to me, I couldn't believe they just jumped in on those Russia sanctions with the EU and the US, because I worked for the blue Swiss bank in Pareto-Platz for a long time. I thought, there's no way they're going to do this, and they wound up doing that. And we've been talking about the end. Is it the end of Swiss bank secrecy? Is Switzerland going to recover from this? Like, what do you think about their banking sector right now?
Swiss banking secrecy has ended a long time ago.
Right.
But I was also kind of mildly surprised by the sanctions against Russia. Although you have to see, in Switzerland, the left parties, the socialists and the green communists, they have become very powerful. And they would like to join the EU, and they would like to join NATO, and so forth. So there is pressure in Switzerland, actually, to be on the side of their American Übermaster, like the other European countries, and kind of give up Swiss neutrality. I am on the committee of an initiative for the Swiss neutrality, and we collect signatures for Switzerland to stay neutral, and we want to anchor it on a more solid footing in the how do you say, in the anyway, I forgot what it in the laws of Switzerland. So
in the legal statutes,
in the constitution of Switzerland, so that there is no possibility that Switzerland would ever give up its neutrality. But it's not easy to find the signature.
Wow.
Yeah, surprisingly, I would have thought every Swiss would jump at the opportunity. I think eventually they will wake up and do it. But so far, the collection of signatures has been difficult.
Wow.
Every Swiss will say, yes, I'm all in favor of neutrality. When they actually have to sign a petition for it, they're too lazy. Or they say, I take it home and send it in, and so forth. You understand?
Yeah,
this surprises me. But Switzerland, like Europe and the whole world, is not like the world I grew up in. You understand? We have in Switzerland 30% of the population that is foreign born. They're not Swiss citizens because it's difficult to become a Swiss citizen. They're foreign born, but the socialists want to give them voting rights, which of course I oppose, but I'm not engaged very actively in Swiss politics because I live overseas.
Sure.
And here in Thailand, I'm not in a position to be actively involved in politics because as a foreigner, you don't have a voting right.
Right. And it's a long way away as well, sure. And it's interesting because that's kind of the old Tony Blair playbook. Joe Biden's playing that with the borders right now in the United States. It's flood, the country with people who we think are going to vote our way for most of the time. It's
yes,
just
exactly. Yes.
Yeah, incredible how that's worked so far. And if we could turn to your latest issue of Gloom, Boom, and Doom, which I love. I mean, every issue is great, but this last December issue just was so much to chew on. You go from the history of Argentina, which is interesting because obviously Javier Milei is now the new president. Libertarians everywhere shrieking and dancing and screaming, "Why not?" And and now we've got but we don't know. He's clearly pro-Israeli. He wants to dollarize the U.S. The Argentinian economy with the U.S. dollar. He's basically flipped off China and Brazil, at least in the beginning. He's kind of backing away from that. We're not saying he's a WEF stooge, and he did just sign to eliminate 9 of 21 government ministries, which is fantastic. But as an international observer, what's your best guess on what's going to happen in Argentina?
Well, my best guess is that the stock market will continue to move up for a while, although it is up already substantially from the lows. It's no longer as cheap as it was, say, 12 months ago. But I think there is some momentum. And as you say, a lot of people believe that things got so bad in Argentina that they can only improve. I would agree that conditions will hardly get any worse. But the program Milei has set up, the removal of various agencies and the dollarization and so forth and so on, are not practical. On paper, they could be realized, but in reality, it won't be realized. And so I think that initial bout of strength in the market will be followed by disappointments. However, I'd like to make an observation. I think it's important for the world to have seen in reality how the public feels about their governments. Everywhere in the world, ordinary people are really annoyed by their government officials who are complete hypocrites, who live a relatively comfortable life, take continuously wrong decisions, but nobody's ever penalized for these wrong decisions. You understand? You're a businessman. I'm a businessman. We take a wrong decision in the stock market, we lose money. the small businessman who has a retail shop or whatever, manufacturing company, he takes wrong decisions. He's penalized by a breakdown of his profits, or maybe even through bankruptcy. But he is responsible for his business, and if it's not successful, he suffers. But the government officials, no matter how unsuccessful they are, how dumb they are, how stupid policies they introduce, they're never penalized, never. They retire with a fat pension that the other government officials over time increase. So there's no risk for these bureaucrats. And most of the bureaucrats nowadays have not worked in the private sector. That I'd like to say. They've been to some sort of a university taught by socialist, communist professors in political science. Then they went into the government, but they never worked in a private sector job. And that I object strongly to. And I think as long as we have these bureaucrats running the show, there'll be no economic growth.
Mm. Yeah, it seems like that, especially in the EU, like if you fail at your national election, they just, especially in Germany, they just push you to Brussels and go, take it, just take the Brussels job and you get a fat pension, and then we can get you at least out of Germany. Like Ursula von der Leyen would be a great example of that.
Yes, I agree with you. The worse they are, the higher they go.
It's incredible. They fail upwards. It's just it's amazing.
I mean, it's amazing.
But I think you bring up a great point that Milei gets elected. Trump had already been elected. Bolsonaro got elected in Brazil. We've got a lot of, with the exception of Poland, shockingly, re-electing Donald Tusk as prime minister. We've actually seen right-wing parties, at least what I would normally call sensible centrist parties, at least, get back in, but they're painted as far right. What do you think? Do you think it's going to take a crisis for the change to really happen before we empty ourselves of these bureaucrats?
I think this is the question that everyone has to think about. I believe that the kind of democracies we have nowadays are not working in the long run, and that they will be replaced by some kind of a totalitarian leader. Actually, the amazing thing is, if you look at COVID and the response to COVID, then democratically elected leaders, like we had in Australia and Canada and the US, they took very harsh measures, I mean, dictatorial measures, in order to suppress the population. And for my taste, what was surprising is that, with the exception of a few isolated pockets of resistance in Australia, in Melbourne, and in Canada at the trucker strike, there was very little opposition by the people. That people would let themselves be locked in, that people in England who went out to have a smoke in their own garden got arrested. I mean, this is unbelievable. Yeah. For someone like me who grew up in a school system where I had to hear almost every day how democracy is freedom, and that we have more freedom than other societies, and that is the optimal system. I don't think so at all. And so I believe that we will one day move to the right or to the extreme left. But it will not be the kind of environment we have in the 60s and 70s and 80s of a very high level of freedom. That is gone.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah,
you just have to walk through an airport. You can see how the government officials are. Yeah. They tell you, these are our orders. They can do anything with you.
Yeah, it's incredible. I wrote a piece interestingly because you get a lot of left wingers who are and friends of mine, because banking's full of them, who were absolutely pro lockdown, thought it was the greatest thing in the world, but are opposed to police states. And I was cracking up. I'm like, if you look at places like Dubai and Singapore and Monaco, I guess almost the richer you get in some circumstances, the happier you are living in a police state because you keep all the rest of the hoi polloi down and they're not going to bother you all that much. But I just
No, but
yeah,
I was talking to a friend yesterday. I mean, it's amazing that the international media doesn't talk much about Dubai. But the fact is, for instance, Dubai is a kingdom.
Yeah.
It is run by Sheikh Maktoum. It's not a democracy. And yet, the country, I went for the first time to Dubai in like 1975. The tallest building was the International Building. It was like 15-story highs. Now it's like a small building when you're entering Dubai from Abu Dhabi. Ditto for Abu Dhabi. All these countries, they've developed marvelously, but not within a democratic frame. And so the media, they hate these countries because they've done so well. Same for Hong Kong, was never a democracy. Now they attack the Chinese and say, well, why they don't have democracy and so forth and so on. But the point is, also if you go to Israel, as an example, and then you go to Dubai, you will notice that Dubai is 10 times cleaner than Israel. That is a fact. Of course, they don't like to talk about this either because, again, it's run by a royal family, Sheikh Maktoum.
Yep.
Same Saudi Arabia, same Abu Dhabi and Kuwait and so forth. But some of these countries have done very well. And China is some sort of a democracy within the Communist Party. The Communist Party has 100 million members, and they will vote people upstairs. And then the fact at the end, the people upstairs will vote for the leader.
Yeah, it's incredible. I love Dubai. I love Monaco's just down the road from here. The places are really incredible how they've developed without that democratic system. And it's almost like, and I look at a place like England, interestingly, where I lived for 10 years, and you can't get anything done because there's about 1,000 committees. Just can't, nothing gets done.
Yes, I mean, this is the problem. I was talking to a lady who owns several hotels in Switzerland, including one at the best location in Bahnhofstrasse. Bahnhofstrasse is the shopping street of Zurich. Yep. And she says, to redo the hotel, to renovate, is practically impossible because they change the regulation all the time. And it's incredibly costly. There's no return on the renovations. And the hotel has the best location, but some disadvantages. To get to the hotel became more difficult when they closed down Bahnhofstrasse to car traffic. Now you can only get to it walking, essentially, or from the back. Anyway, to make a long story short, she says, we'd like to do things, but each time we want to do something, the government comes and says, that you can't do, and this you can't do, and so forth. And every business in the world, in democracies, has the same problem. To open a restaurant in Melbourne or Sydney has become incredibly difficult and costly. I'm all in favor of the view that inflation is a problem that arises through fiscal deficits and money printing. That we can all agree upon. But another factor is that the government, through its irrational policies and world-improving policies, makes everything more expensive.
Yeah.
These are all world improvers, but these world improvers have never worked in their lives. That's the problem.
I think that's a great point. And it's interesting. If I could just move from kind of put the spotlight back on Latin America, because you wrote in your latest issue of Gloom, Boom, and Doom, and I love this because I honestly I've never had an affinity with Latin America. I've never been there, and it says you wrote you own Latin American stocks for 4 reasons. One is that they're outside the theater of war. If something kicks off, they're probably not going to get hit. Stocks are reasonably priced. They should benefit for the long-term commodity cycle because they're very commodity rich.
Yes.
And momentum right now. You also mentioned, and this is fascinating because, again, stuff I wasn't looking at. Mexico's up 27% this year. Brazil's up 23%. Argentina, 124%, all in US dollars. You also mentioned that Chile's a massive bargain. And you also mentioned Pakistan, even though that's obviously not South America. One, like the first thing is, did we miss the easy money? But the second thing is, I'd love to get just a peek into your process. How do you look at all this stuff and just present it? Like, is there something special you look at? Every month you go, okay, I got to look at this scanner? Do you? I'm absolutely fascinated by this whole thing.
I shouldn't say that, and it's a joke. I go to all the porno sites in the world and look where the legs are the best looking. No, you see what happened these days. I moved to Hong Kong in 73.
Mm-hmm.
And then 73, 74 was the US bear market.
Right.
And by 74, emerging markets were extremely depressed compared to the US.
Mm-hmm.
And they stayed depressed. And Hong Kong took off until 1981, 82, had a boom. And then there was a property market declining after 1981. But the country did okay between 1980 and 89. And the market that did particularly well during that period of time was Japan. And then money flowed out of Japan and into other markets in Asia, like the Philippines, which was very depressed in 84, 85, into Thailand, which was also depressed. And then in the end of the 80s, the markets that opened up was India and Indonesia. These were new markets, and also China. So by 86, 87, the Asian markets were expensive, and I was bearish about Hong Kong, and I predicted the crash. But in 86, I started to travel to Latin America because, and this is important, I had read a book which is, and the title is The Economics of Inflation, okay?
Ooh, okay.
And here he was an employee at the Reichsfinanzministerium in Germany between 1918 and 24. And he wrote about inflation and the impact of inflation on everything, on society, on the currency, on the exchange rate, on the stocks, and so forth and so on. And one observation he made is that in high inflation economies, stocks tend to become very cheap in real terms because the currency collapses. You know, if you look at markets, I always look and calculate in US dollars, because you could have a market like Turkey in local currency, it's up in the sky, but in dollars it's down. That was the case end of 2021. So in 86, Argentina, the total stock market capitalization, there was a large economy and still is a large economy, was less than 500 million US. The Philippines was at 350 million US. And so when you look at these things in US dollars, you realize what is cheap. And I traveled to Latin America. The first country I went to was Chile and then Argentina. And then I started to invest because Argentina was really dirt cheap. And so I've been keeping in touch with Latin America and that from time to time investments in bonds and stocks. But recently, as I said, I became attracted to stocks because they were very low. Say you look at Petrobras in Brazil, it's still an inexpensive company. Or in Colombia, you have very inexpensive companies at the present time. So that's what I'm looking at. And in Asia, because of high inflation, the Sri Lankan stock market had collapsed. But now it's also rallied quite a bit. And also Pakistan is very inexpensive relative to the rest of the world.
Right. Yeah, I just looked at that. They're up 50% in the the PAK ETF, I should say, is up 50% in the last 3 months. So it's just an amazing call. And again, stuff that I just went right over my head. That's why I was so fascinated by it. So that's great. So you basically look at everything in US dollar terms, give me the total market capitalization, and that's how you evaluate cheap versus expensive, essentially.
Yes, and I mean, I used to travel a lot to all these countries. Now I don't travel anymore as much because of the inconvenience of traveling that the COVID crowd has imposed on us. But I follow stocks and commodities daily. I spend hours and hours on the screen watching stocks. And I mean, some people say the guy is crazy. Yeah, okay. Some people watch horse races, and some people watch soccer matches, and some people watch Australian football. What is it called? File or what?
Yeah, the Aussie rule stuff. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, the
crazy
Aussie
people,
rule.
Yeah.
That's, I mean, a tough game.
It is indeed.
You might be suitable for it.
I played American football. Those guys, at least I had pads on. They don't play with pads. They're nuts.
Yes, I mean, this is a murderous game. Anyway, people do certain things. That there are people that collect stamps and they file the stamps during the whole night. I watch stocks and I like Western movies.
Awesome. Fantastic. That's great. Oh, I really appreciate that bit of insight. That's fantastic. And let's, since you mentioned the USD and we're talking about the US, in your last GBD edition, you quote Dan Mitchell extensively, and this jumped out at me. Real median household income in the US fell by 2.3%, but real median post-tax household income was 8.8% lower. So basically, your dead middle of the middle class is just absolutely getting killed right now with both inflation and taxes. So the average household paid much more in tax.
But I would say this is the case throughout the world.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, in Australia, seriously considered, the cost of living in Australia has gone up a lot. If I travel to Australia nowadays, Australia strikes me as an expensive country.
It is indeed.
To eat oysters in Australia is more expensive than in the US. It's amazing.
They had loads of real estate buying from the Chinese in Sydney and Melbourne, and they also have a 50% tax rate. Like the normal people pay 50% there. It's just an insanely high tax rate there, I think.
No, you should consider it's insanity. Consider the quality of what you get for the 50% that you pay these idiots in government. That's the problem. If you'd get high quality services, and there are some countries, my friends in Norway and in Finland and Sweden, they keep on telling me, yes, our taxes are very high, but we have a good social security system, and. But this is not the case in Australia, it's not the case in Canada and the US. The worst is the US.
Yeah, I've always said, like, because a lot of my friends are like, why would you live in Europe? And why would you live in Italy? But I've always said, like, if you put them on equal tax basis, I think Europe's a steal. I absolutely love living here. I think paying for Obamacare, and I've got loads of friends who are paying an exorbitant amount for Obamacare. It's ridiculously,
Exorbitant.
yeah, hugely expensive. So
But
besides, you don't get much for your taxes.
Some economists observed once and told people, if you think that healthcare is expensive, wait until it's free.
DJ O'Rourke, yes, absolutely. I love that quote. That's a great quote. And it's so true, though. It's so true. Well, interestingly here, just so I don't sound like I'm tooting my own horn, I went to a doctor's appointment. I had to do a follow-up. This was in September. And I said, oh, great. When can I go? And they go, are you free in July? I'm like, it's September.
Unbelievable.
Next July, oh my God, yeah, crazy. But the reason why I brought up that U.S. question is I was just wondering if you had any thoughts about the upcoming U.S. election. A lot of people think Joe Biden's going to drop out. Trump is going to be the Republican nominee. It'll probably be Newsom in the Democrats. I just wonder if you had any ideas yourself on what's going on in the U.S. for the presidential election coming up.
Like every election, it will matter who counts the votes.
Indeed, like last time. Oh my goodness.
But in general, I think that Biden may run, but then resign, and his VP becomes president. And my sense is that in most democracies, the leader, the president, is a puppet of people behind. I mean, nobody can tell me that Biden takes decisions. He's not capable of writing a speech anymore. Someone does it for him. Mm-hmm. Someone tells him what to do and how to behave and so forth, and what to decide. The question is who? And that I don't know. I've asked many of my friends in America. They all have, ideas of wealthy people and of Jewish people, and some people say the Freemason and the Jesuits and whatnot. Who knows? But there are people that are powerful, and they keep these puppets going, and also elect them, put them in place. And I think the same is in Switzerland, and the same is in Australia, and so forth and so on. For sure, the WEF has a lot of influence.
Yeah.
That I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what the motives are of the WEF is not entirely clear to me, but it would seem to me that it is not an organization that favors democracies, but favors their own power. In other words, a global government, whereby the problem for them is now that India has become a very big country and powerful, and China. And then you have these countries like Indonesia, 250 million people,
yeah,
and Pakistan and Bangladesh, and so I mean, it's endless. This world that doesn't belong to the inner circle of the WEF is 88% of global population. So the world has changed a lot, and we don't know what the result will be. But in America, whether Trump is elected or Biden, there's not much difference. There's not much difference. The deficit will stay high.
Yes.
To bring down the deficit of any democracy is practically impossible. Practically impossible. You may contain its growth somewhat, but this is now becoming an issue, because let's say we have interest rates and inflation coming down after 1981.
Right.
So we are in a deflationary cycle, and a cycle of declining interest rates until 2020. From 2020 onwards, we are, in my opinion, in a cycle of rising inflation rates and rising interest rates. Now, as in the 70s, these cycles are interrupted by counter-trend movements. I mean, in 1969, interest rates on the 10-year Treasury peaked out at 9%. And in 74, it peaked out at 12%. But thereafter, inflation came down and interest rates came down, but then they took off again until the peak in 81.
Right.
And so we could have for 6 months, even 1 year, good news on inflation. But thereafter, it takes off again.
Mm-hmm. So that leads us directly into my next question, which is, and again, right out of your issue, long-term rates. Every economist in the world are like, they're going down. The Fed has to cut. I'm not quite sure about that, but it should, all else being equal, lead to precious metals and mining stocks finally to take off, which we've been waiting for. At the end of October, somebody monkey hammered gold right on the close to make sure it finished under 2,000. This month, November, the end of November, they couldn't do it. But over the weekend, and in Asia especially, we rallied to 2186 before someone clobbered it again down under 2100. What do you see for gold and silver, in 2024? Are we going to have a sustained rally? Are they going to fight it the whole way?
I'd like to answer this question by stating that gold and precious metals is a large position among my assets.
Mm-hmm.
So among my assets, I kind of have 25% in stocks, 25% cash and bonds, 25% precious metals, and 25% real estate. Yeah, it varies a bit, but roughly. And so the 25% in gold is very large for me.
Sure.
So in a way, I'm a true believer in gold.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not a true believer that gold will go through the roof. Okay. Because I grew up in the 50s. So in the 50s, if I buy a pack of cigarettes or if I buy a bread or croissant or a can of soup and so forth, I know the price in the 50s and I know the price today and I know the appreciation roughly.
Mm-hmm.
So say 20 times or 10 times in the case of Switzerland. Gold in the 50s, 60s, until 71 was $35 an ounce. It's now close to 2,000. Is it a bad performance? No. It's kept its purchasing power. That's what I want to say. It's not extremely cheap and it's not terribly expensive compared to the collapse in intelligence of central bankers. Yes. Yeah. Gold should be at 100,000 if you would have an inverse relationship to the intelligence of central bankers. But otherwise, compared to your daily expenses, gold has kept roughly its purchasing power.
Right.
But I am a large holder and I will never sell my gold. Mm-hmm. But then we have to address the question, where do you hold gold? And will the government take it away from you one day? And then you understand, this is another issue. It's like real estate. Do you own real estate in the city centers or you own real estate in the countryside? All different stories.
Mm-hmm.
But I believe that gold mining shares are today incredibly low compared to the price of gold. You understand? We can establish these ratios going back to 1960. So in 1979, gold shares were high compared to the gold price. Now, the gold price is high compared to the gold shares.
Absolutely.
It's like real estate. Hong Kong properties are now, the properties are not particularly cheap, but they've come down. But the property stocks sell at 70, 80% discount to the asset value.
That's right. You mentioned that in your latest issue as well, which is incredible. Because I only left Hong Kong in 2018, and I thought it was outrageously expensive to live there.
Yes, I
Back then.
agree with you. But everybody always tells me, oh, Switzerland is so expensive. I tell them, yes, if you measure it by traditional yardsticks. But this is when you compare prices, you have to measure different things. For instance, I was always in Hong Kong, so my daughter went to a private school. My brother, he was married in Switzerland. For each child, he got like some money from the government, and he sent his daughter and his son to government schools, which in Switzerland are very good. I mean, very good. The teachers are all socialists. So you have to take your children home and beat them up and show them pictures of Russia in the 70s, 80s, and of Cuba, what socialism does to a society, right. And send them on their holidays to the Gulag in North Korea, a holiday camp in North Korea. Then they will wake up and never again in their lives do they want to be a socialist.
Right, exactly.
So now, but you understand, an American says, oh, Zurich is so expensive. Yes, for him. But for the Zurich, for my brother, he sent his children to university, all essentially free of charge.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, because you get that all a part of your tax package.
Yes.
And again, it's a fee paid involuntarily, but if you get really good services, you don't mind so much. That's fascinating. If I could just indulge you, if you just indulge me, just one last question, because I didn't put it on there. I just wanted to get your opinion on BRICS and what is happening, what hasn't happened so far. When we're looking at the meeting in Johannesburg, we thought, oh, they might come up with an alternative currency. That didn't happen. They brought in 6 new members instead, Argentina being one of them. And Milei said he doesn't want to enter anymore. I'm just wondering, since you're out in Asia, and that's probably the main story, on the front pages for politics and economics, what's your view of the BRICS as a bloc? Is it a cohesive bloc, or is it just going to turn out to be a free trade area? Any idea on that?
It's held together by the hatred of the Western democracy under the hegemony of the US.
That is true.
You look at the Gaza-Israel conflict at the present time. Mm-hmm. The Western world all essentially agrees for Israel to bomb the hell out of Gaza. Mm. They actually supply the weapons to do it.
That's right. Yep.
This is, this is now I'm not saying that I have a better solution, but it is not a solution according to human rights and to the, say, international courts of law, right, which the US doesn't recognize anyway.
That's right.
But the BRICS association is a group of countries who politically are very loose. I mean, there's nothing in common between India and China, and they could one day be enemies and are in some border areas enemies and so forth. But at the same time, it's a group of people who disapprove of the world being run by rules that have been imposed by the colonial powers, and they are now the post-colonial powers. You understand? They kind of run the world according to their standards.
Right.
And all these countries, they disapprove of that. It's like about 3 or 4 years ago, Liz Truss, she was at the time in Britain, the foreign minister. She went to lecture Modi in India and his foreign secretary. And you have to laugh when you see the little Miss Truss lecturing a country who is close to 1.4 billion people. And Britain, what influence do they have? Nothing. Mm-hmm. You think they could send their army to China the way they did it during the Opium Wars of the 19th century? They are a laughing stock.
Yeah. Yeah. I just wrote an article today in the Root, funnily enough, about how weak all the NATO powers are right now, save the United States, which is 70% of the budget anyway. It's just incredible. I don't think Vladimir is going to walk across Europe anytime soon, but boy, if he wanted to, I bet he'd have a decent shot at taking the place. Incredible.
I don't think he has any intention. He wants Ukraine not to be member of NATO,
yeah.
And he wants the Eastern Territories and Crimea Peninsula.
Yeah, that's right, Crimea. That's it. Yeah, and he's done.
That's it.
I agree. I agree.
But the Western media, how they portray him. But the one thing I want to say, I believe if you measured GDP correctly in the world, in other words, normally people look at GDP, but GDP is a very kind of questionable measure of growth. And two, real GDP is a better measure, but it depends on who calculates the rate of inflation.
Right.
I think a fair calculation of inflation would be to say that over the last 3 years, for most people, the cost of living has gone up by 30%.
That's
about
right.
And now we may not go up strongly from this level for the time being, and some items may continue to go up, and the items may come down. Like this year, energy was down and so forth. But in general, we're not going to go back to the level of 3 years ago.
Right.
This has happened, this inflation.
Yeah. That's right.
Now, the question is, will we then go up again? And so forth. That is my belief. Because with the budget deficits in America and in Europe so large, and in America, they have the additional wonderful problem of unfunded liabilities.
Which
you understand, in Australia,
the
pension fund system is relatively well financed. Because of the contribution into the pension fund system. In America, this isn't the case. So there are lots of unfunded liabilities.
Yeah.
And if the US continues to embark on wars, all these expenditures are astronomical. And Biden gives here a few billions and here a few billions and so forth, but it adds up. And at the end, it's a very large deficit. And if you study the history of the Roman Empire, essentially one cause of the collapse was the lack of money. At the beginning, they made a lot of money, but later on in the empire, new provinces cost more than their addition.
That's right.
So I'd say this is a problem long term. And my view long term is the governments, and all governments throughout history have done that, solve the problems through inflation. And inflation is a tax on the middle class.
Yeah, that's right. It's regressive, and it really does hollow out the middle class.
Hurt a lot.
It really does. And, the U.S. doesn't have a middle class anymore. I grew up there in the 80s. I thought it was the greatest place in the world, and I feel bad for people growing up there right now. I really do.
Yes, I agree. When I like to watch old movies, from the 50s and 60s, because they show a bit society the way it was.
That's right.
And I also like to watch the traffic in the 50s.
But they had pretty cars. Yes.
And the cars that were owned by the gangsters and so forth. So it's wonderful. But society has changed a lot. In America and in Europe, partly because of the immigration. And I'm not saying that everything is worse. A lot of things are better, but a lot of things are worse. And I believe that the freedom we had in the 60s, and yes, we had demonstrations, but not everybody was out to shoot each other. There there was debate. Now it's all very aggressive. And I don't know whether you saw the recent interview in Congress of this president of Pennsylvania University, Wharton. I mean,
everything's in context.
It's an amazing thing. I mean, that they can't come out and say that it should be objected to, that someone says, kill all the Jews. You know, I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah, it is. It is just.
These are these academics that are in top jobs who are, you know, they're gone mad. They're gone mad.
Yeah, it reminds me of that G.K. Chesterton quote: "Don't be so open-minded that your brains fall out."
Yes. Yes, this is a wonderful quote. Okay, so we had a nice time. You have further questions?
No, I just wanted to say thank you so much. I've been, you didn't disappoint, that's for sure. I've wanted to talk to you for so long. Everybody, I hope you enjoyed Marc as much as I did, and we'll see you soon.